Hello, everyone. Welcome to our monthly webinar. My name is Casey Schmalacker. I'm Vice President at New Frontiers Executive Function Coaching. And before we dive in, just like to always encourage, if you have any questions throughout this, please use the Q&A function. You can plug them in and I'll either get to them during the presentation or I will get to them at the end. I may be looking to the side a little bit just to see if any questions are coming in. Just a couple of other housekeeping items. I will be sharing over a recording of this afterwards as well, in case there's anyone you want to share it with. And we do always share over just a feedback survey, if you wouldn't mind taking just 2 minutes to fill that out and share some feedback. So tonight we are talking about snapping out of just getting by, reclaiming your energy, time, and focus. And so first off, a big piece that we're going to be talking about is identifying that you're in this survival mode. We're going to start off talking about how you identify it, what it looks like, the consequences of it, and then we're going to dive into the toolkit of snapping out of it. So if you feel that you're constantly waiting for life to just calm down so you're able to get to things, or if you're feeling that you're doing the bare minimum just to get through the day, or if you feel that your goals have taken a back seat to just staying afloat, or maybe you don't even really have any goals, you've lost sight of what your long-term goals are. Or if you're feeling stressed, ashamed, or guilty for not getting more done, and that's a big one, of just feeling like you're never getting to the things that you want to be getting to. And so if any of those are resonating, you might be stuck in this survival mode. And just to share some statistics over, 91% of adults say they feel stressed in at least one major area of life. And often that stress is kicking you into this survival mode. 1 in 3 people feel emotionally exhausted most days. 76% of workers say that they feel guilty for not being more productive. And the World Health Organization has actually classified burnout as an occupational syndrome. So there's an issue going on. And chronic stress, all of these factors actually shrink the brain's prefrontal cortex, where your executive functions and self-management strategies and techniques live. That's actually being decreasing in size as a result of this chronic stress. And so there's a bit of this system that goes on that we kick into this survival mode to try and deal with this stress, but it's not getting to some of the root causes of that stress, leaving you in this state of chronic stress. And then it actually is impacting your ability to snap out of it. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, is snapping out of this survival mode. So just some additional common signs that you're just getting by and you're just floating by, just trying to stay afloat, and you're in this survival state, is you're doing tasks on autopilot, but you're feeling disconnected. They're just items on a checklist, not connected to any bigger picture. You're always behind, or you're feeling always behind, no matter how hard you try. That feeling of you're in a hole and you just can't get out of it. You may avoid starting things because everything feels too big. That kind of overwhelmed aspect of why even start? I'm not going to be able to catch up on things. Feeling guilty for resting, but you're too drained to do more. You're just in this stuck phase of perpetual struggle and survival. You may stop doing things that you know help. So you might see some exercise routines, meditation, self-care, organizing yourself, all things that when you're not in that survival mode, you know benefit you. You start making excuses why you can't get to those things. And that actually exacerbates the problem even further. And then your day is full, but your goals are on pause. And every day is just full with tasks, but it's not connected to any of those larger goals. So where are you on this getting by scale? And I'm sharing this over just to start helping with reflecting that there's not just this good or bad aspect. There really is a full spectrum of areas that we are in. And so all the way on the left, we have this stalled out piece of the scale, where you're checked out or frozen. You've stopped trying to move forward and you just really shut down both emotionally and mentally. This is when you keep yourself in that survival mode and it's almost like your body's just starting to give up. Yeah, nothing's working. And this is just your body telling you, like, you can't keep going the way you're going. Next up, we have this survival mode where it is just you're drained and you're very reactive to things. You're overwhelmed. It feels like there's some motion going on, but that motion is just to stay afloat. Tasks feel heavy and burnout is lurking. You're just hanging on by a thread before you get into that stalled out part of the scale. Then we have getting by, where you're completing what's urgent, but everything's urgent. And so your big picture goals are sidelined because you're just constantly focusing, waiting for more to come in, and you're just trying to clear the plate of new things coming in. But your big picture goals or these other longer term projects and things that you're working on are put on pause. There's very little clarity and there's little extra capacity to take on more. Then on more of the positive end, we have purposeful, where you're managing tasks and you're still anchored in purpose, but maybe there's some energy dips here and there. Things aren't perfect. And then you have thriving, and you're energized, focused, growing, you're clear on your goals, and you have momentum. And part of why I like to share over this scale is it is not realistic to place expectations on yourself to always be thriving. There are going to be times that you are just getting by or you're in survival mode. Hopefully we catch things before you stall out, but you really are going to move between the last four parts of this scale. And anyone that tries to tell you like you'll never kick into survival mode is being very idealistic. And a lot of the key of this webinar is that it's okay to be in survival mode, but let's identify it. That way we can activate some strategies to swing us back at like a pendulum back towards the thriving end of this scale. And so I ask everyone here, just take a minute. Anyone watching this after the fact, just take a minute. Try to identify where you are right now. That self-reflection is so important, because then if you are thriving, you can reflect on what is leading to that. How does this feel? What's setting me up for success? Or if you're in that survival mode or that getting by stage, which we're going to talk a lot about, identifying that so then we can do something about it. For anyone that's joined afterwards, just again encouraging, you can use the Q&A function at any point. So what is survival mode really? When you kick into survival mode, it's really a stress response. And it's very similar to that fight or flight response that's kicking in to help keep you safe. It's for survival. And what's happening here is that energy is redirected from the growth-oriented systems in your brain, which are more in the prefrontal cortex, to more basic functions. And a lot of this survival mode, we're going to talk about very briefly, not getting too much into the brain science, but that this is going more towards lower parts of your brain, like your limbic system. So what we're looking at here is your prefrontal cortex begins to dim. That's where those brain systems that support focus, decision-making, rationality, emotional regulation. And so just think about this, that when we kick into this survival mode, your brain is really reallocating resources away from those growth-oriented and stabilizing parts of our brain to more base functions in our brain. So this isn't a motivation and a desire. This is a very biological function that's happening when we feel threatened, when we feel like we're not moving ourselves forward, when we get into these stuck phases. So your limbic system begins to take over more. And this is where a lot of emotions are based. And you ask anyone, emotional decisions tend to not be the most rational ones. Think about the last time you said something out of anger. That wasn't the most rational and ideal thing you said, because it was based on more coming from the emotional parts of your brain than the rational part. So you're more reactive. There's a constant threat scanning, seeing where, like, you're always worried, what's going to catch me off guard? And that's where you can begin to lead to shutdown, because by not addressing what's this perceived threat, your brain's best option is to shut down. It's, let me avoid this because everything else I'm doing isn't working. So the brain isn't distinguishing between a work deadline and a tiger chase. And I think that's what's really important here, is that these parts of our brain, these systems, this movement into survival mode does serve a purpose. And it served even more of a purpose when we were hunter-gatherers out hunting, and there was prey that was hunting us. And so in the short term, when there's these threats there, it does make sense to reallocate resources from those rational planning, goal-directed parts of the brain towards the limbic system. So understanding that your brain isn't saying, hey, a work deadline, it's not that big of a deal. Like, it's not like a tiger threat. You know what part of your brain says that? The prefrontal cortex. And so what's really happening here is understanding that this is a base primitive response that really stems from just like a very basic aspect of being human. Before there were jobs that had work deadlines, before there was school and finals and things like that. So your brain is shifting from strategic thinking to reactive doing, trying to remove those stressors so that you can get back to balance and stability and feeling safe. Now, it may feel like laziness, but really what this is an overload on your system where, because you're not addressing the sources of that stress, your brain is just getting overloaded and worn out by being stuck in this survival mode state. Because you're not supposed to be running from a tiger for days and days and days and weeks and weeks and weeks. But a lot of people in adulthood or throughout school, you can be in this constant state of never catching up. And so you're constantly feeling stuck. And again, just to loop back to the beginning part of this, the main part of your brain that can help you get out of this, the resources aren't being allocated to it as much. And so that's where we really need some tools to snap out of this survival mode. And so just taking this quote, this between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response, from Viktor Frankl. And I think what's important here is that when we're getting into survival mode, when we're not able to tap into those resources, that space between stimulus and response decreases. And so acknowledging that this is often one of the first steps in snapping out of this and reclaiming your energy, getting back to a sense of stability, is building more space in between something happening and how you're choosing to respond to it. So what pushes you into this survival mode? How did we get into this in the first place? Now, survival mode it is caused by stress, but only really in the sense that it's a result of our self-management system's inability to adapt or absorb that stress. And what I mean there is going to be stress in everyone's life. There are always going to be things that tax our systems, that throw us off. But our ability to adapt or have systems that can flex for the stress, that is where we're able to avoid being pushed into survival mode. So when we don't have these systems in place, or the systems aren't built to withstand certain stress, these stressors can then push us into that survival mode. And so you can see this little image of a building. When there are earthquakes in certain cities, they incorporate that into the building design. They make the buildings able to withstand a certain level of earthquake. And so what we really want to be focusing on is the things that push you into survival mode is the systems you have in place are like a building that isn't built to withstand earthquakes. So there are certain triggers and stressors on your system. So unexpected changes to plans, or just unexpected changes in anything. Did we account for those changes? Too many roles or shifting responsibilities or priorities. Just constantly like, which direction am I moving into? It's very hard to make self-management when you have multiple different areas and multiple shifting priorities, because how can you build a system around something that's so dynamic that there's no consistency? There's emotional upheaval or mental fatigue that can add in stress to our system. So there's a lot of people that maybe your systems are built to navigate a day to day. But if you have a tragic loss in your family, that's going to be something that adds stress to the system. And so, again, I'm trying to normalize that we may get into survival mode. So knowing that there are going to be things out of our control that put too much stress in our system. And we may find ourselves in this survival mode. And what we're going to talk about a little later is snapping out of it. There could be decision overload and just decision fatigue, too many decisions all at once, which start making certain things fall apart, or a loss of routine or structure. So sometimes transitions can really push us into this survival. Collapse can happen when these routines are improvised and not reinforced. So there's some stress on our system. And so we try to use some routines. We're just improvising as we go along, but it's not really having a holistic view on how is this routine helping me? Not just for right now, but really trying to set things up for longer term success. You can be relying a lot on memory and motivation instead of systems. And so we're just adding in more into our brain to focus on, putting even more stress on what it needs to remember, not having reliable fallbacks and safety nets for us, not giving any bandwidth through planning efforts for recovery or recalibration. So this idea that if I put in more time instead of resting, I'll catch up, but you're never allowing your battery to recharge, that can really lead to some of this collapse. Lacking some fallback strategies for when there's curveballs. And so always feeling like you're waiting for something unexpected, and then the unexpected comes and it throws you completely off, may lead to a collapse and a fall into some of this, the survival mode. Or you've built your life on habit, but not really that intentional design of, are these habits purposeful? Are they setting me up for success? Just doing a quick question check. Okay. So what is the cost of this? Because, and I think this is so important. I know no one, when you label it as survival mode, no one is saying, yeah, I should just be surviving. But I find it really important to highlight the cost of this, because so many people, through my experience coaching, they rationally know survival mode is not serving them. They rationally know just getting by isn't serving them. But deep down, there is this part of their brain that's trying to convince them that it's doing what's best for them, that this is what they need now. And that's where that's primitive side, that almost irrational side of the brain trying to tell you that what it is telling you is important really isn't. And so by a lot of the work that I've done with clients is really trying to help them convince themselves, really lean into the fact that this is a lie my brain is trying to tell me that this is benefiting me. So survival mode isn't the enemy. It is your brain's way of protecting you. But when you stay in it for too long, it does start to cost you. So the longer you stay in survival mode, your clarity begins to fade. So you lose sight of your priorities and goals. Your motivation begins to dry up. Everything begins to really feel like a chore, even things that you do care about. Your confidence erodes. That is a typo there. So sorry for the duplicate, but your confidence erodes because you don't have wins. You just feel like you're getting by. You feel like you're maybe just maintaining the status quo, and it doesn't feel good. You're not advancing yourself. And so you start beating yourself up and your confidence erodes there. Oh, looks like it happened with these. Apologies, guys. So you do have decisions that feel heavier. Each decision feels like there's so much weighing on it. Sometimes you can get into decision paralysis with this, really coming from some of this decision fatigue because you're so nervous about making the wrong decision because you have such limited bandwidth. Your connection weakens, so you may withdraw or lose patience with others. And that burnout is building up quietly in the background. So you feel like you can't rest, but you also can't push yourself forward. So let's do a quick survival mode self-check. So in the past week or 2 weeks, have you felt like you're always catching up and never ahead of things? Feeling that sense of accomplishment? Have you ignored or postponed things that matter because you're just too drained? Oh, I can't get to that. A big one. I just can't get to the gym. I got to do some work. I just can't do it. I can't do it. An even more poignant one that I like to point out is, like, if you are one that meditates, can you not find 5 minutes? Right? Are you not getting to these things that may matter to you? Have you skipped meals, rest, or basic self-care to get things done? Have you forgotten what your bigger goals even are? When was the last time you checked in on them? What's your progress towards them? Or have you gone through days on autopilot and barely remembered them? And so if you said yes to 2 or more, you might be stuck in this survival mode. But remember, this isn't a diagnosis. It's a signal. It's a sign that we can do something. So the goal isn't to feel bad about it. It's to notice it. Because the second you notice that you're in this stage, you can start tapping into that rational side of your brain. So even though I mentioned earlier that your brain is reallocating resources from more of this rational piece of your brain towards the more primitive and basic functions, that doesn't mean all the resources are going there. It may just mean it takes more effort to reallocate those resources, really focused effort on building out time for this, telling yourself over and over that I'm in this survival mode and I need to kick out of it. So let's dive into the Snap Out Toolkit. I'll first present it over and then we'll go into each of the 3 stages. So I want to use this analogy where we get into survival mode of imagining that you're in a rowboat. You're in the middle of the ocean and a storm comes. And so you just are rowing. You're just trying to get yourself out of this storm. So you've made it through it. That survival mode served its purpose. You were able to do your best to focus. You were reacting to your environment to keep yourself safe, to get through that storm. But then the storm passes. But you keep rowing the same way. You're rowing without direction. You're burning energy. You're going nowhere because you still feel that threat. Even though the actual storm has passed, you still feel there's that storm. And so you're going nowhere. And now it's time to pull out your compass. So the first stage is to regain awareness. It's the first stage of us identifying and labeling and naming where we are. Where are we on that scale? Am I in survival mode? Am I in just getting by? But let's label it so that we know that our brain is being inefficient right now, tapping into the wrong parts of itself. Next, we're going to want to check our compass. So this is like reconnecting with your tools and helping pick a direction. So let me pause. What were the tools that have worked for me before? What did I start to give up? What strategies can I tap into that worked before to help me feel more in control? And then let's set some short-term goals that we can begin to reorient and give ourselves some direction. And then we're going to set the course and start pursuing it. And so this is where we're going to be taking a small intentional step. And we're going to keep checking, keep pulling out that compass, make sure we're moving in the right direction. Are we heading in the right way? Are we on track? So with step one in regaining awareness, when you're stuck in this survival mode, your brain still thinks you're under threat. So to reset, we have to convince your brain that the danger is past. And some of this stuff is going to sound really easy, but I promise you, I would not have a job if it was as easy as just saying, hey, brain, do this. There's a lot of work in coaching of trying to gather evidence and helping clients see and convince themselves that they're in these stages. And so I just want to share over, while some of this may seem like a very simple 3-step process, that by no means makes it easy to do. So when we're regaining awareness, let's label what's happening. I'm in survival mode right now. I'm being very reactive. I'm not strategic. And if I stopped and paused and really try to come up with the best solution, it'd probably be different than what I'm doing right now. Name what's not a threat. So really being able to identify that what is making us feel so threatened. What is this state? And let's try to tame that. Let's bring this back down to reality. I know I found myself sometimes when I'm in survival mode, when I found myself in just getting by, it can feel like the biggest deal in the world. But a reframing of what is that threat? Why do we feel like we're just getting by? And let's imagine it as less stressful, less urgent, less dangerous. And let's relabel this as something that's just overwhelming, something that I can chip away at. So the first one is really, where am I at? The second one is, let's try to make this realistic so that my response can be based off of the appropriate level of the threat. A tiger is not chasing me. So let's just name it to the level of the threat that it really is. Then let's identify what's no longer working. So this might be, this behavior helped me get through, but now it's holding me back. So let's label, okay, I stopped going to the gym while I was really trying to play this catch-up mode, but now I need to get back to it. That strategy was just helping me get through the storm, but now I'm out of it. So I need to snap back into the strategies that are supporting me. And a lot of this, as I said, is just to get our brain thinking and getting this awareness of where we're at. So you can't reset your direction until your brain believes you're safe. I always use an analogy when talking about this kind of threat response, the stress response that we have, of a burning house. And so if a house is burning, that's not the time to focus on fire safety and why didn't you have the fire hydrant? Why didn't you get this checked? Why didn't you change the batteries in your smoke detector? No, that is not the time. You first need to get out of the fire. Then we can begin to reorient ourselves. But until your brain actually believes you're safe, it's almost like you're trying to have a conversation in that burning house, even if it's with yourself. And so by bringing the temperature down, then we can begin to think about and tap into that rational aspect of, this isn't as big of a threat. Now I can begin to be strategic. And so that's where we move into that step 2 of checking your compass. So now that your brain is out of that threat mode, there might still be some lingering aspects. It might not fully go away, but it might not be all encompassing in your brain anymore. The key isn't just to rush forward, because that's still reactive. We first want to reconnect with what's grounding us. So really thinking about this stage as, the first stage is about putting things into perspective and identifying. And the second stage is to begin building up a firm foundation again. Because when we're in that survival mode or just getting by, there's not a lot of stability. There's this concern that something's you're going to fall through the cracks and it's going to collapse all underneath you. So the first thing is getting through that storm, identifying that we're in this constant state. Then we need to begin thinking about and building up a foundation for ourselves. So what matters right now? This is where we're starting to tap into some of these executive functions where let's focus on one priority. The other benefit here is when you're moving out of this survival state or this just getting by state, we tend to not have a lot of confidence. And so by setting one priority, you're helping yourself focus on getting some of these short-term wins to refuel some of that confidence. What tools or systems have I dropped? So what routines am I no longer doing that were working for me before? What supports have I stopped doing? What planning habits? What helped me before that I haven't been using because I felt under threat? Don't feel guilty though when going through this. I see this happen a lot. Why did I ever stop? All of this stuff that doesn't serve us. It's okay. We got into the survival mode. We felt it was the best decision to drop some of these things for the period of time, but now let's get them back in place. And what's a small step I can take to stabilize? So what's something you can actually do today? Not a wish list, because if we just start writing things down on a wish list and don't start activating, it might cause more anxiety. Oh, just another thing I'm not getting to. So you don't need a full plan. We just need somewhat of a direction and your tools in hand. That way we can move on to the step 3. This is where you're pausing and you're creating that space from that quote I shared. We have these stimuli. Now we stop and we think and then we respond. This is building out time to think about what tools, what resources, what routines are going to be the best thing to get me back on track, to get me back towards that thriving end of that spectrum. Step 3 is to set your course. So with the clarity and tools in hand, it's time to start running again. But this time with a direction, with a purpose, with a goal in mind. So choose that one small win, something achievable that restores a sense of movement. And let's start doing it, even if it's the smallest thing. So if you really are feeling like, let's say you're in a job and you're so backed up and you're feeling like you need to go for 8 hours a day, nonstop being reactive. Okay. Start work at 8:45, 15 minutes earlier to just try to plan your day. Do certain things, 15 minutes, 5 minutes of a self-check, but just showing yourself that you can make a plan and then you can follow through with it is one small win. The win is what matters more than what the actual strategy is. The convincing of yourself that you can set an intention and do it to help yourself is what really matters here. Take that first step just as a follow-up from before and do it today. Even if it's tiny, send one email, open one doc, clean the sink. Just make this first step something that you begin to do so you don't tap into that same putting it off and then it falls into the procrastination pile. And set a check-in point for yourself. Maybe it's the end of the day. Did I do the 5 minutes? Did I clean the sink? Did I do that one thing that I set out for? And then check in on yourself to hold yourself accountable, but also to help reinforce that you were able to do it. It's almost like you're convincing yourself that you can set intentions, that you can follow through, that you can act proactively instead of always reactively. Tomorrow morning, you might also do it. Maybe it's a week from now, but trying to get ourselves to some accountability of setting small intentions and then getting those small wins. And then really asking yourself, am I still heading where I want to go? Am I making progress? Or what other tools can I tap into? So progress, again, does not really require a full plan, just movement in the right direction. Because the more you carve out in this space, the easier it becomes to build upon that. It leads to that momentum. It's like a snowball going down the hill, and it keeps getting larger and larger. Doing a quick question check. Okay, nothing yet. So I want to just stop and tackle one thing about the motivation myth, because I see this more and more and more with people that we work with, where a lot of people talk about motivation like it's the key to success. Oh my God, they're so motivated. But it's actually one of the least reliable drivers. And it's actually a lie that we tell ourselves to keep us in that survival state. It holds us back. That aspect of, oh, I'll do that when I'm feeling more motivated. The problem with this is that motivation is more of a mood, it's not a plan. If it was as easy to just say, I'm going to be motivated, everyone would have a great plan all the time, right? But you can't plan around when you'll be motivated. So motivation really becomes a trap when you're stuck because it's fleeting and it's tied to these dopamine spikes. And often our motivation has been hijacked with technology, social media, video games, just all of these have hijacked our dopamine systems. And so it's become even harder to try and tap into motivation because cleaning the sink is not, and telling yourself good job after you did it is not tapping into the same amount of dopamine as scrolling through TikTok. It's incomparable. And so relying on it as a sustainable solution doesn't work. Survival mode does suppress some of this motivation because really all of your motivation is just turning into removing the threat. And as long as you're in this survival mode, you feel like you're never removing the threat. And so you're not having those dopamine motivation responses kicking in. Waiting to feel like it really leads to no movement. And it's one of the biggest signs of procrastination. I'll wait until I'm in the mood. Typically, at least when I hear it from clients that I work with, means they're never going to do it. And systems are more reliable and better than waiting for these sparks that are unpredictable. You can't make plans around unpredictability. So where I like to help people focus is that this motivation aspect is like gravy. It's nice when it's there, but you can't build a meal around it. And so progress comes from discipline, not dopamine, follow through, not feelings, and structure, not sparks. And I have this little magic lamp here, genie lamp here, to show that motivation is like trying to rub on a genie to grant your wishes. It's not realistic to rely on this. But motivation can be viewed as more of a reward. It's not fuel at first. It's not what we're waiting to get started. But when we make actions and we have these small wins that build up our confidence and we're feeling good about ourselves, that leads to more motivation because we're feeling good about ourselves. And when we feel good about ourselves, our body rewards us with some dopamine. Wow, I'm really proud of myself. That leads to motivation, which then can help fuel this system. But motivation comes at the end of that cycle. It's not at the beginning of the cycle. And so motivation isn't going to be what gets you out of survival mode. So in the early phases, when you're snapping out of survival mode or just getting by, you want to start with structure and tiny actions because that structure helps build discipline around ourselves. But don't expect the motivation yet. Later on, you can begin regaining this momentum and those wins build confidence. And that confidence begins to generate more motivation. And then the motivation can start supplementing this and making it easier to keep moving forward. Use motivation when it shows up, but don't depend on it to start and don't rely on it in a system. It's not a good system if it's relying on motivation. And you want to anchor progress with routines. So routines, if you remember, I said that when we're in those, when we fall into that getting by and survival mode, it's almost like our foundation of self-management has collapsed. And routines are a key to help us begin stabilizing that foundation again. And again, if you don't have a foundation, you're much more likely to feel threatened and fall into one of those more reactive states. So why routines matter? They do help reduce decision fatigue and reactive behavior, because a routine isn't something that you're thinking about, it's something you do. And where the thinking happens, the rationality comes in is when you set those routines. So routines help decrease the amount of decisions. Should I organize my week? Should I go to the gym? Should I map out this larger project or my larger goals? If that is just built into a routine for yourself, then you're not making the decision, should I just react and do the work that I have right in front of me? It can reintroduce structure without overwhelm, and it anchors us for when life gets chaotic again. So what works best early on when you're trying to transition out of these reactive stages is some of these routines like daily bookends. So simple start and end of the day rituals to help bring you some rhythm to your life, some consistency and stability. Externalizing tools like checklists, visual cues, alarms, or shared calendars. Sleep and nutrition routines. So just protecting your energy baseline. Talk a lot about Maslow, but making sure you're getting your basic needs met. So just sleep, safety, eating, planning time. Carve out moments to check in and look ahead. My biggest one that I like to recommend is try to carve out 5 to 10 minutes each day, and then maybe around 30 minutes either on a Sunday or beginning of the week, where you have a larger look at what's coming ahead. Or some environmental resets, so small tidying tasks that can help reduce the mental clutter. Routines create a foundation stable enough to build from even when life is still messy. And so by focusing on some of these, they're allowing it to react to changes more. And then to keep going without slipping back, progress really does stick when we keep checking in. And so this step really does matter because survival mode can be very sneaky. Getting by can be very sneaky. It creeps back in when we stop paying attention. Our brain is constantly trying to, so much in our world taps into this stress response. So our brain is just getting constant signals to maybe go back into survival mode, go back into survival mode. And that's where the creep in comes in. Internally, it's really convincing that we need those to go back to that. We need to tap into those survival strategies. And so where these check-ins help is they really stop us. They catch our behavior slipping into that. So small wins can lose momentum when we don't stay intentional, but also by not reflecting on the small wins, you sometimes lose the benefits from them. If you don't see that as a win to help add some fuel to your confidence by checking in on it, then it just becomes tasks you're doing, not things of, you know what, I did this with intention. And habits and mindsets do need reinforcement, not just a reset. And so there is just this constant reiteration of these things, these structures I have in place, these routines that I have in place, they help me in the long term. And so what the check-ins are doing is it's helping us zoom out from the right here and now and beginning to look big picture again. How to keep going with this. Check in weekly, what's working, what needs adjusting. Celebrate these small wins to reinforce your effort, not just outcomes. Expect setbacks, normalize them, don't spiral from them, and revisit your compass. Realign when things feel off. And so just to begin the wrap up with another quote from Robert Sapolsky, the frontal cortex, that rational part of the brain that we've been talking about, makes you do the harder thing when it's the right thing to do. And what we're really trying to do is re-tap into that, because when we're in more of that limbic system, defense mechanism, survival mode, we avoid the harder things because we're just trying to get out of that state. But the way that that part of your brain is telling you to get out of that state is in tapping into this which is going to be the right things to do to snap you out of it. Because this is the frontal cortex is where more of that rational thinking that's really going to think bigger picture and set us up for success and not tap into those emotional reactions. Got a short one this time, or shorter. So I have time. If anyone does have any questions, you can drop it into the Q&A. If you prefer to just email it over to me, I'm happy to answer any emails for any questions that come in. If anyone's interested in learning more about how we can help you in snapping out of this, getting by in this survival mode, you can either submit a form on our website, nfil.net, or you can give us a call and we'd be happy to have a discovery call. I really do want to normalize this is not easy. It's hard to work against our brains when it's not serving us. And so help is there if you may need.